Welcome to the Point News interviews. I'm Daria Pick, and today it's an absolutely delight to have Tom Saxe, a content writer on social media. Hello, Tom.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Wonderful.
Great.
Yeah.
Today we're going to have a deep conversation and we're going to talk about history and a little bit about philosophy. Let's talk about history. What's the most essential aspect of this science?
Well, just my opinion, but the essential aspect of our history is, I think, the last 150 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution up until now. I like to write about the fact that our species has been going through crossing through a threshold, and that threshold is the difference between the last 2,300 years and what our future may or may not hold for us. I mean, with the situation that our world is in today, it's just we have more modern weapons. If you go back 2,300 years, it's called the Age of Pisces. The Age of Pisces, if you Google it, to do a search on it, the two key words that pop out is the age of religions and wars. Now, I'm not into astrology, but if you Google the age of Aquarius, which is that fast approaching, some say we're already in the very beginnings. The age of Aquarius, if you Google that, the two key words, the age of technology and peace. So having said that, I believe that within your lifetime, certainly my grandson's lifetime, that as a human species, we're coming to a fork in the road. Okay. And that fork in the road, whichever way we go, one way, I believe, leads to the complete annihilation and extinction of our species. And if we go the other way, it leads on to what I call beam me up, Scotty, Star Trek time. In other words, the future. And so when you ask me what is the most significant part of our history, we're living it right now. I've studied human evolution from the first time that, if you want to say like a caveman, first time he picked up a stick or a rock and hit the other caveman with it, discovered it was a good weapon. All the way through tens of thousands of years now, we have nuclear weapons at the push of a button. And everything in between's included. The advance of medicine, our evolution organically. The world is in really dire straits, but I'm an optimist. I believe we're going to take the correct fork in the road. It may not be all 8 billion of us, but our societies, with everything that you see going on today, it's all kind of like the culmination of what we've been doing for 2,300 years, religions and wars. So I can get into more of that in detail, but That's why I think our current time frame is significant, because I believe we will have a history beyond, in other words, we're not going to become an extinct species on this planet. I believe we've had at least two other, what you might call intelligent life forms, inhabit the planet over the last, pick a number, 10 billion years. There's no evidence, because eventually everything just kind of rots away. Rust turns to dust. But that's my answer to your question. We're living in what is the most significant time in our history, but we've been living it for 150 years.
How can we prevent misrepresenting history and be able to verify facts?
Well, there has been a lot of misrepresentation of our past. There's been a lot of, let's say, if you look at scientific evidence, is where I'm leading to, that science is, like, as an example, in religious circles, in some religious circles, they believe that human life and the world itself, they believe that our planet is only 6,000 years old, 8,000 years old. But the science disproves that. Science itself disproves that. If they look at the scientific evidence, this planet, like George, I don't know if you know who George Carlin was. He died some years ago. One of the greatest stand-up comedians ever. And he did a thing where he said, people worry about this and that, pollution and this and that. Our planet's been around for 20 billion years. It's going to go through changes, ice ages, whatever. One time Antarctica was a tropical jungle. I mean, so whether we just happen to be our species, which if you want to go back to the point in time when our species known records written or painted on the walls, records. It's only, pick a number, 15,000 years. The oldest evidence that our species even had the knowledge to paint on caves is what I'm saying, is not that old compared to billions of years that this planet is just this solar system. And so we're like just one little tiny piece. We're like I like to say, we're like a fart in the wind, I like to call it fly fart, because you don't hear a fly, that's one of my Facebook pages. Fly farting in the wind, can't hear it, So in order for us to conceptualize the truth, it's really is very much bearing on what science provides. They got these places around the world that are tens of thousands of years old. Some of them predate the last ice age. Kodepi Depi, whatever, Tepi and Kaduka over in Asia, all these different places that were left standing because they were made of what? Stone. Stone doesn't rust. Buildings, the Eiffel Tower, the skyscraper, Statue of Liberty, they're all going to be gone. Literally less than dust in another 100,000 years, So it's really hard to, on one hand, say, well, the Bible says, blah, 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 blah. And then on the other hand, the scientists are saying, well, I'm sorry, but, that might be a written part of your history, but it doesn't go far enough back. The earth itself is a lot older than you think, So I think in a roundabout way, trying to answer your question that as our species has evolved, we have learned a lot more about ourselves. If you go back in history when there were no rockets to the moon, go back 5,000 years, go back to the Egyptians. There's still questionable things about who built the pyramids. The Egyptians sure did. The pyramids are older than that society. So we've been learning more as our species evolve. It's like that caveman with a rock hit his neighbor in the head and killed him, and looked at the rock and says, oh, I think I'll keep a hold of this thing. In fact, then later on, what he does is he ties it to a stick. That rock now becomes a club. He didn't understand life the way we understand it today.
How do politicians use history to shape their desired ideology?
Well, that's pretty easy. I mean, politicians are known for bending the truth, right? When you take a look at just recent history, go back to the turn of the century, 1900. Take a look at Henry Ford. This is before the creation of Nazi Germany. As you look at the rise of fascism in Germany, one of Hitler's biggest buddies was Henry Ford. And a lot of other people. They were openly, this before World War II, you could go down to your town hall and join the Nazi Party. This is before the war, of course. At one point in time, the Queen of England, a lot of people were, meeting with Hitler before the war, And what happens? I don't agree with what he was doing. And he was obviously had a couple of screws loose up here. But my God, they sure rewrote history, didn't they? Because you can't find as much evidence on how, before the war, how popular Hitler really was. you know, and that's just one. Um, History has been rewritten about the Catholic Church, uh, not about the Catholic Church itself, but certainly history was rewritten for hundreds of years to hide the fact that at one time the Roman Empire was controlled by really evil men, these popes. I mean, I don't want to name names. They've been long dead. God bless them. Whatever. But today's politicians, it's like Looney Tune time. I mean, it's they're they rewrite history, and it's only a year old, or it's 2 years old, or 4 years old. I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. I'm a pacifist, atheist, uh, futurist. I'm not an apologist. Um, I see the evolution of America's political system taking place. That's unfolding. It's been taking place since 1963. Actually, before that, it started taking place when General Eisenhower was president. And in his very famous speech, he says, watch out for those dudes that control all the military industry. He was talking about the military industrial complex. And so, it's on one hand, it's fortunate to be alive to see it all really now finally taking place over the last 75 years, ever since World War II. There have been the slow changes in our societies, and at the same time, over that last 75 years, we see the Cold War against USSR and the eventual fall of communism in Russia. Now it's Russia, which I personally like Russia. Okay. I'm going to say that to all your listeners out there. I personally like many things that Putin has been doing. I don't like all of them. I don't like everything. But at the same time, look at what China's doing. Over the last 75 years, they went from rice paddies to building bullet trains to landing on the backside of the moon recently. The only thing I want people to be aware of is the evolution that's taking place in our species, which is what I'm talking about, this fork in the road that we're coming to, from the age of Pisces, which is the age of religions and wars, to the age of technology and peace. There's going to be a couple hiccups and bumps along the way. China operates on 1,000-year business plan. Communist China has a 1,000-year business plan. Which I haven't read, but I do know that part of it is to eventually take over the world. We talk about a one world government on the West. In the Western country, they talk about, the eventual control of the world by the Western, But China's had this 1,000-year business plan for a long, long time. That's part of what I see because of that third stroke that I had, that I see There's going to be some turmoil. You know, we see it right now in the Middle East, Ukraine, and Somalia. You know, Jesus ain't coming back as far as I'm concerned to fix things. And more and more people are beginning to educate themselves because of the internet. You know, isn't it amazing? What an education we can get both. This goes back to your point to finally answer your question. Politicians rewrite history. The internet rewrites history. Wikipedia rewrites history. You really have to have a lot of common sense to know the difference between I guess you could say good and evil, but you know, we all come out of our mother's wombs as very pure children, you know. So what we learn as we are indoctrinated over the years is either going to be wholesome, pure, loving, kind, compassionate, full of forgiveness, which brings up one point I got to say. Even though I was raised in a Christian family, my mother taught Sunday school. I was a gospel singer back in the early 70s, believe it or not. I sang gospel music. I've done the national anthem at Dodger Stadium on August 13th, 1981. It's not on the internet, obviously. You can call Dodger Stadium and ask the front office who sang the national anthem August 13th, 1981. I was a vocal. And I really, really was in the early 70s, it was the Jesus movement. I tried hard. I really tried hard. But a lot of it didn't make any sense to me. That was when I was in my young 20s. When I was about 32, I woke up one morning with this unreal, magical forgiveness in my heart. And I had to find my stepfather. I found him. Now we're both from Minnesota. He just happened to be in the LA area and halfway house. But we sat on the grass in MacArthur Park, eating McDonald's. And in my heart, I forgave him for killing my mother, beating my mother to death. And that kind of forgiveness lives with you the rest of your life. Now, in his mind's eye, my stepfather Ed, sitting there eating his Big Mac, whatever. In his mind's eye, I was still a 15-year-old Tommy. That's how far his mind was gone. His mind was so far gone, during one point in a couple of hours, at least 2 hours that we sat there, he says, "How's Evie doing?" Evie was my mother's nickname for Evelyn. His mind was so far gone that all that mental issues he was having because he was held captive as a spy by the Germans and tortured for 2 years. Didn't find that out until he died. I didn't say, "Dad, I forgive you for killing my," you know, I knew the direction he was going in our 2 hour, remember that time you helped me carry the rowboat? It was all memory for him. The reason I bring that up is Christians today, I don't care what denomination, Catholic, Roman Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran, whatever, they say something that's found in Luke. Can't remember now. I can look it up. It's actually found in two different places, called the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, which we all have uttered at one point in our life if we're Christian. If we're another religion like Muslim or Buddhist, then no, we haven't uttered that prayer. But in that prayer, the King James Version is a little different, but basically it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation. To forgive us our trespasses, then that just kind of goes over everybody's head. Because the way I looked at it, that morning I sat there on the grass in MacArthur Park and had this miraculous forgiveness in my heart for my stepfather having taken my mother from me in such a brutal way. And in the Lord's Prayer, I felt like, well, I changed the words. Now I tell people, I said, when you say the Lord's Prayer and you say that part, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive our sins as we sin against. No, say it this way. What God is saying is, I'll forgive you just like you forgive Billy Bob over there. And there aren't enough. There you hear on the news from time to time a mother get up in a courtroom and say to the convicted killer that just been convicted of killing her daughter, young man, I'm commanded by God to forgive you, and in my heart, I forgive you. I'll never forget what you did to my family, to my daughter. Do you hear people saying it? But it's a very small percentage of people that understand. So the full circle is back to what we were talking about. If you can't forgive, you won't be forgiven, regardless of what you believe. Now, I believe that after over 30 years of research, I believe in live and let live and the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which the golden rule is not from the Bible. It is found in every main religion on the planet, just said in different ways. And I believe the era that we're coming to, because as an optimist, yeah, we might have nuclear wars, we might have this, we might have that. The survivors that come out the other end, going into the age of Aquarius with technology and peace. And that's why I like to say it's the beam me up Scotty time, like in Star Trek. Forgiveness is the most important thing in the Lord's Prayer.
Yes, I think it is important, Tom. Thank you for sharing with your touching personal story. I'm so sorry that you had this experience. And I have one more question about, as we're speaking about, I think we should speak about wars. I mean, in your opinion, it's just, what do you believe is the primary reason for war?
Money.
That's a short answer, and I think it's actually, I guess it's right.
For a one-word answer, it is.
Yeah, it's short and understandable.
Do you want an explanation?
Yeah, our politicians ain't unable to agree. Perhaps high selfish aims worsening the realization of the consequences. I guess they're just their minds are blurred. I don't know, they're fuzzy because of their greed of power, and they don't realize that there are a lot of consequences.
Yeah, like they say, money is the root of all evil. Well, it when you look at recent history, and I'm talking about going back to probably beginning with the probably beginning with as the major war, World War I, till now, uh, as technology increased, because our brain increased. I mean, who would have thought that we would have had a guy, Wertheimer, whatever the dude's name, uh, these men that invented the atomic bomb. Who would have thought? Uh, Especially if you're back in, say, 1897, who would have thought? You know, I say 1897 because that's when they had the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. But the powers to be, that's just like I said, Henry Ford. He was deeply involved. When you look at the uh, military power that the United States had, because they turned all the manufacturing plants into manufacturers of tanks, and I mean the war machine has, I think, like evolved, but it's a terrible evolution. That's why I say we're at the end of that 150-year threshold, and what's happening today. I mean, I could get into telling people why the United States is wrong about Ukraine. They're killing tens of thousands of people in the Donbass region since before 2014, really. I could, uh, I see NATO falling apart at some point. There will be no more NATO. I do see the rise of peace in the Middle East. It's going to be a tough one. I like to joke and say that if there was no Zionism, which is an ideology of a political strategy created by an atheist. I mean, the guy that created Zionism, the grandfather of all Zionism, was an atheist. But I see all of this, everything that we could talk about that we see in the news cycle every day is a result of money. And what we see happening in its early stages, if you look at BRICS, oh, yeah, I think it's almost 2 years ago now that Russia went off the dollar and went on to the gold standard. Watch how many countries now go to gold as a standard and trade amongst themselves with their own currency based on a gold standard. What I was saying is I believe as a species, we'll be turning our swords into plowshares. Plows. In other words, that's an old folk song or two, probably two or three folk songs, that instead of our factories building tanks and missiles, and, that instead of, like in this country, the U.S. spending trillions of dollars on a war machine, that we actually spend it on infrastructure, building bridges, new bridges, high-speed railway, high-speed transportation. It's just around the corner. Might be another 50 years. I don't think it's 50 years. I think the tipping point is coming quickly. I think when you and my children, my son is, well, both my kids are older than you. Tommy's 45 and Tara's 41 in their lifetime, but they'll be old. So, in the next 30 years, I think we're going to see some good things and bad things. We're going to come out the other end, call it prophecy, whatever, but I believe as a species, we are going to go through a lot of stuff, yeah, but we're going to come out the other end, and maybe there'll be that peace that comes along with technology. That's the age of Aquarius.
What is required to create an ideal picture of the future for humanity?
Well, I think one thing it's going to take is all of the major countries, all the NATO countries, Russia, China, United States, Canada, all the major, they sort of had an idea of it back in what year was it, 1948 or 1947, when they created the United Nations. Back then, believe it or not, there's a guy named Gary Davis. He passed away some years ago. But there's a documentary, if you just Google world citizen Gary Davis. If you Google it, you'll find a documentary produced and directed by actually a friend of mine, Arthur Kanigis. And back when they had the creation of the United Nations, Gary Davis proclaimed himself the first world citizen. Let's all be citizens of the world. Put our differences aside. That's, I think that's from 76 years ago, or whatever it was, whatever year when he said that, 1951, whatever it was. I think it was prophetic, I think. Even though we might go through some ups and downs and dips and valleys, I think what it's going to take is that a people-driven process from the ground up, a ground swelling, if you will, that will change how our world, it's already done that. You communicate with us, it'll change how the world communicates. How about the internet? Cell phone. You can go to, I think they now in the deepest, darkest jungles in the Amazon, they got cell phones. But to answer your question, I think that it's going to take some really wise leadership along the way that will listen to people like I'm saying to you right now. Hey, all it takes is forgiveness and compassion and love and sympathy and empathy. And I feel strongly about this that I have not personal friends, but I follow people that are U.S. citizens. One of them has been denied his passport now, and he was a United Nations weapons inspector, and he's a good guy to have on your show. And he had been traveling to Russia, just speaking to the common people, just speaking to people out in the villages and factories. And I think there's been too much creation of, by the Western media especially, boogeymen, too many boogeymen. And that's all falling apart. See why? It's falling apart because of technology. We're starting to discover that family and wherever, pick a country, pick a third world country, that they put their pants on before their shoes. They have children that go to school. Life is life. And what Gary Davis said and was preaching about more than 76 years ago, he was a World War II Army veteran, bomber pilot. That our world is going now. The beginnings of it we see, sort of. I mean, look, it was I forgot what year. It's been like 2008. I can't remember the year. Vladimir Putin had asked if he could join NATO, if Russia could join NATO. And they said, no, sorry, we don't like you. This is all coming to a head. And, the dollar is no longer king. We're the people that are still in control. They're called by different names, deep state this, and military industrial deep state that, and so forth. But I think people are trying to make a difference. That's why I say I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I believe it's two wings of the same turkey vulture. But some of these politicians are trying. I mean, this is not an endorsement of anybody, but under a certain president for 4 years, we had no war. So getting back to your question, what's it going to take? It's going to take all of us to communicate with each other and say, this is enough of this shit, excuse my French. You know how that phrase came about? Excuse my French. Back in the 1800s, I think it took place in Paris. It was a guy from Great Britain. These are all politicians, by the way. Frenchman, Russian, Frenchman, a Russian, a guy from Great Britain, a German, they're all standing there in a circle. And the only guy that couldn't speak any French was the guy from London. And they're standing there, and the Frenchman is talking to the other three politicians, telling him what a huge idiot the guy from London was, because he knew he couldn't speak any French. He says, I wish I could speak somebody. Then he looks at the guy from London and says, excuse my French. Excuse my French. No, it's going to take all of us. I mean, it starts from the bottom up, not the top down. And I highly recommend you Google the documentary about Gary Davis. In fact, I'll send you the link on the phone. If you just Google Gary Davis, world citizen #1, the documentary should pop up. It'll say documentary, and it's a couple hours. It's a well produced. Arthur did a great job. I used to live on his estate down in Mexico. That's why I know him. When I lived in Mexico, a great documentary. But what Gary Davis was saying more than 70 years ago is it starts from the bottom up. They didn't have the internet then. There is a movement behind it. You can actually you can procure a world citizen passport that's actually legal passport, not in all countries. In some countries, I still recommend you take your U.S. passport or British passport or whatever, but they actually have a world passport that a lot of countries will stamp. World passport. I'm a world citizen. That's what Gary Davis said. So my quick answer, which is, I never give quick answers if you know it. My quick answer is starts with you and I and everybody else.
That's a wonderful answer. In the end of our conversation, I wanted to ask you a philosophical question. Is that everyone? I think you are an optimistic person. So about happiness, everyone wants to be happy. What advice would you give to people to eventually achieve happiness?
Well, being happy, happiness, I'm happy with my life. I could show you a picture. Actually, I don't. Hey, Shelton, say hello. Shelton, he's sleeping. I don't know if you can see him on the floor there. Anyway, my dog Shelton.
Oh, that's your dog. Shelton, his name?
Shelton, yeah.
I guess he's cute.
He's sleeping. Hey, buddy. Here we go. Say hello.
Oh, I can't see him.
Happiness. Well, this is assuming that you don't have some sort of mental disorder, okay? Because if you have any kind of mental disorder, you're either going to be one of two things. The happiest person on earth or not happy at all. So for normal people, happiness is being satisfied with what you got. and following the golden rule, number 2. Actually, golden rule number 1. If you follow the golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to do to you, that's really number 1. If you can feel that sympathy or compassion for someone else, and I did a meme one time of a man holding up actually a man in a suit. You couldn't see what he looked like, but he had a suit on, handing this starving man on the ground, laying on the ground, and he's reaching out and he grabs. I photoshopped in a bag of microwave popcorn, and the man of color on the ground is saying, "Bag of popcorn? What the fuck?" Yeah. In other words, show your compassion, show your sympathy, but don't do it by just sending your $1 million check every month off to United, whatever. Take it to the streets right where you live. In every city in America. You can find us all over the world, but wouldn't it be nice if you could help end starvation on the streets in LA by taking that $1 million and opening up what they call soup kitchens. Now, they have soup kitchens. They're all religiously run, but happiness is a function of how we live our lives. And I can say that ever since I had, at the age of 32, and mind you now I'm 76, but at the age of 32, that ability, miracle of forgiveness for my stepfather, for beating my mother to death, okay? A real forgiveness. Now, it was years later we found out what a war hero he was and found out why he was such a nut, because during the war, he was a spy behind German lines and he got caught. He spoke 7 languages or whatever. He went in the Army, World War II, as a lieutenant, and he immediately went into what they call a Signal Corps, which in those days, if you were a spy, you were attached to the Signal Corps, okay? But my point is, ever since then, that's been, my math is not that good, but subtract 32, 76. What is that, 44 years? I've lived a good life and a happy life, and I'm not done. My little prayer that I say every night when I go to bed, Shelton's up there licking my face. I don't think about death really. I mean, I used to, as a so-called air quote Christian, worry hellfire and brimstone. to bed. Yeah, I'm 76. I've got some physical issues. I've had 4 strokes. I've got an aneurysm in my brain behind my right eye. And my heart has an enlarged, slightly enlarged aorta. I've got some health issues. I'm not afraid of death. But every night when I go to bed, my prayer is simply this: I'm not done yet.
I hope you have a long, healthy, and happy life. And what's supporting, helping you to keep this positive attitude?
Again, it's not easy unless, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a normal person. I'm not going to tell you what my IQ is. It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You can have an IQ of 70 and be a happy person. Many years ago, I worked with a fellow. We sat and had lunch every day together. And he was the oldest at that time living that I knew Down's syndrome person. He was 56, had Down syndrome, worked in a factory on an assembly line. He was happy, 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 happy. That's why I said earlier, if you have a mental disorder, you can either be happy or miserable, filled with hate and bitterness and strife all your life. I've got relatives like that. I know people like that. So the key, I think it really still boils down to, if you're a normal, average, whatever, is the golden rule really sums it up for me. Because if you follow the golden rule, you're not going to be selfish and egotistical, are you? Or masochistic or homicidal or all the other statistics. You're not going to be racist. That's another whole story. I like to tell people I've never had a racist bone in my body. Do I dislike evil people? Yeah. But I think that part of that evil isn't from Satan or something. It's mental dysfunctions, mental disorder. I mean, I don't want to get into any phobias. I have counseled veterans with PTSD for the last 20 years. And I've also counseled adults who have childhood PTSD like I did. Imagine at the age of 3, when my mother married my stepfather, I grew up in a very violent household for 12 years. Talk about PTSD. But I overcame mine with forgiveness. So when I see people that are just downright evil, they're sick mentally. if they were normal, they wouldn't function like that. So in my future world that I see, I'll stop with telling you this. This will be the end of it. In my future world, what I see is, what do you do with all the nuts? I'm talking about the ones at the top that are killing people, drinking babies' blood, whatever evil they're doing. What do you do with them? Put them in a nut house? No. I've got a special little place for them. It's an island. And I call it Devil's Island 2, just like in the movie Papillon. If you ever looked that movie up, great movie, Devil's Island. Anyway, my Devil's Island will hold about 100,000 people. And they'll have their mansions and swimming pools and, I like to say sometimes, bagel shops, movie theaters, whorehouses, grocery stores. They'll drive nothing but electric vehicles, but they can't get off the island. They'll be happy. Killing each other off, probably, doing their evil deeds still. But the island, a huge island, I haven't picked the island yet, will be surrounded by a ton of sharks, just like in the original movie Papillon. And patrol boats, don't want anybody to escape. And their children won't be there, obviously. I'm not talking about throwing whole families on the island, but it's just one of the thoughts I play with in my mind of, what do you do with all the evil? Can't kill them all. Of course, that, it's like having a guillotine with a conveyor belt. What do you do? Evil exists because these people have mental problems.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wish to finish this conversation on a good tone, and let's go back to happiness, and please share your advice for people.
Be a nice person. Follow the golden rule. Have forgiveness in your heart. If somebody cuts you off on a freeway, don't shoot at them or flip them off, Count to 10. The old saying back, I think every child has heard this from their parents. Now, Johnny, count to 10.
That's really great advice, Tom.
Happiness is within yourself. You create your own happiness. And it's really, there's no secret to it. Just be a nice person with compassion, with empathy, sympathy, forgiveness, love for all mankind, and the story.
Thank you, Tom. I think that's a really great advice for people. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again, and we'll be in touch. Have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me, Daria.
Thank you, Tom. It was a delightful conversation. I'm glad that you participate.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.